Today is a very special day for horror. You might be thinking, oh, what is it? I can't really think. There isn't anything new that's coming out today. Well, I'll give you a hint. It's Friday, and it's the 13th of November. If you didn't understand what that was, today is Friday the 13th, and as many of you know, there is a popular horror franchise called Friday the 13th. If you don't know that, then you'll surely recognize Jason Voorhees, this guy on screen with the hockey mask. Yeah, so anyway, as it's a special day, it's Friday the 13th, they don't come around all the time. And since there isn't going to be any Friday the 13th movies that we know of in the near future, I thought now's the best time to give my ranking on all 12 movies. So coming in at 12th and last place, we have Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Now this is, I believe, the 9th movie in the franchise, and they decide to take it in a completely new direction. They change it up too much, and like, for example, they bring in this whole thing about the Voorhees bloodline, which had never been mentioned in the previous movies. Jason became kind of like a supernatural being in the previous movies after he'd been killed in the final chapter, but in this one they just make him a supernatural entity who can possess people and can only be in their true form if they possess someone from the Voorhees bloodline. So that is just an absolute stupid thing to do, and they bring that in the 9th movie in a franchise. So trying to change things up that far into a franchise, it's not a good sign, and it was never going to end well with the audience. Like, we don't actually really see Jason in this movie because he's just possessing people. So it's just a truly awful movie on this list. Coming in at 11th place, we have Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. So in the previous movie, Jason Voorhees had been properly killed off. Everyone thought that would be the end of the Friday the 13th movies for now, but nope. Only a few years later, they go and bring them back, and they take it in a bad direction. I'll give it praise because it was cool to have an older Tommy come back, even if he wasn't that helpful in the story, wasn't that great. And that goes for all the characters. They were all extremely unlikable, and although there were a lot of kills, nearly all of them were done off screen or just the close-up reactions of the victims' faces. And it's revealed later on that the reason is because it's not actually Jason, it's someone dressing up as Jason. So they used that effect in the first movie, but the killer was actually Jason's mum, so that's fair enough reason to not show their face. But in this one, if they're dressed up as Jason, then why can't I just show them? It makes you think something's up, and you're right. And when you find out what is up, it's the most stupid thing ever. Doesn't make sense that much, and they didn't bring back the movies just for an awful thing like this. Coming in at 10th place, we have Jason X. This movie is by far the most ridiculous movie on this list. They take Jason and they put him in space. This movie, I'll give it is a lot of fun, and the movie itself is aware of how ridiculous it is, and that means the characters can give in and give ridiculous performances to match it. Things go very bizarre with all the futuristic content, just everything that happens up in space in this what looks like an early 2000s cheap space movie. No matter how ridiculous and fun it is, nonetheless it still is not a good movie at all. It just has a lot of fun elements. It's not as serious as any of the other ones, but it doesn't matter if it's self-aware and ridiculous. It doesn't take away from the fact that it's still quite a bad movie, even though it is one of the more fun ones on this list. Coming in at 9th place, we have Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. First of all, this title is just a straight up lie. It's pretty much the equivalent of a YouTube video being an extreme clickbait, because Jason is only in Manhattan for about 20 minutes, I'd say. And even then, it's not even filmed in Manhattan except for one scene. So realistically, it's not even true to what the title is. The majority of the movie is spent on a boat, which I'll give this movie some credit. It was actually interesting seeing Jason kill on this boat. Maybe if there was like a full-on cruise ship, you know, with families and all that, that could have been a cool, interesting movie, because it's putting him in a different environment, and an environment where people can't really escape because they're stranded on the boat. But this one, they just got it all wrong, not just because of the misleading title, just that did kind of doom it from the start, when it's not even gonna be what the title suggests it is. Like, you're thinking, oh, Jason's gonna be in Manhattan killing all these people. He tracks down the same set of people from the boat into Manhattan and just kills people, get in the way along the path. There's nothing significant that happens in Manhattan except for him punching someone's head off. They also have some strange things with the character having visions of Jason as a little boy, which had no reason to it at all. And to top off this ridiculous and bad movie, from previous movies we've had Jason unmasked and he looks a bit different every time. This is by far the worst one, because he just straight up looks like melted ice cream. Coming in at 8th place, we have Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Praise has to be given to this one, as they try and change up the franchise by bringing someone with telekinetic powers into the mix. Yes, it is ridiculous, but in terms of entertainment, it did give Jason a proper fight for once. It wasn't just people running away from Jason and inevitably dying, or just shooting him and that not having an effect. This time he actually did struggle. We got thrown through stairs, you know, there were a lot of practical stunts here. Kane Hodder takes a beating as Jason, and I believe he won an award for the longest time being set on fire in a movie. I could be wrong, but I remember hearing that in a Dead Meat video. You can bring in some interesting elements with the telekinetic powers from this girl, who's pretty much just the biggest rip-off of Carrie from the Carrie movies. You can have these interesting elements, but if you don't have a good storyline or you don't execute it well, then you're not going to have a good movie, and that's what happens here. And the Carrie ripoff herself isn't even likeable, and that's the same goes for all the other characters, so it's really hard to enjoy a movie which isn't executed well, which has poor characters. You can praise that they did something new, but yeah, as I said, didn't get anything else really right. And like, even with the kills, a lot of them were censored, as they were trying to cut out on the gore in these movies. And to top it off, probably one of the most dumbest endings in this whole series 10 movie. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Yeah, so Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, comes in at 8th. Coming in at 7th place, we have Friday the 13th Part 3. This is the movie where Jason gets his iconic hockey mask. Some think he just had it from the beginning, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But to be honest, this is just the same story, the same template as the first two movies that came before it. Teens go to Camp Crystal Lake to get drunk, to do drugs. Jason comes along and kills them. Just the same stuff all over again. It is a very forgettable movie on this list, as it's too similar to Part 1 and 2. However, the thing I remember it for is its overuse of 3D, which had just been introduced around that time. It was very distracting, and there's one moment in particular with 3D where, if anyone has seen this movie, they'll know what I'm talking about. It's when Jason crushes someone's head. They use 3D for that person's head being crushed, which looks so bad. Not because of 3D, well, that does play into it, but the head looks so fake that it's just so laughable. In fact, I had to pause my movie to just sit there and laugh at how bad it looked. On top of that, the characters brought in are so obviously just there to be killed. I know you could argue that's what these movies are for, but this is pretty much just a carbon copy of the second one, as it does have Jason in it, just with different characters, and I can't even say a new environment. Coming in at 6th place, we have Freddy vs. Jason, the big clash between the two horror icons, Freddy from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and obviously Jason from the Friday the 13th franchise. Just quickly say I uploaded a video of my ranking of a Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, so if you want to see that, I'll leave a clickable card in the top right of the screen. But yeah, the plot here doesn't completely make sense with how things play out. But to be honest, I don't think many people actually mind, as we finally got to see Freddy and Jason battle it out. And if it is a bad storyline, I can just look past it. There are some clever things about it, but there are also some poor things which you don't really acknowledge, as it's just so fun seeing these two horror icons on screen together battling it out. I mentioned it in my Nightmare on Elm Street ranking, but these characters make for a really interesting fight. You know, Jason is this big brute who can take all the damage and doesn't even show that he's been affected at all. Whereas Freddy, the strongest, as he's in your dreams. Everyone has to dream. They need sleep. So, and when you're in your dreams, you're, I'm guessing, very vulnerable. So it just makes for an interesting fight and two different fighting styles. It's nowhere near a masterpiece, as it's mainly focused on bringing these two icons together, but you just have to appreciate that it wasn't drowned out by the story. The story wasn't great, it didn't distract from the battle, so you can't really complain about that. Coming in at 5th place, we have Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Many people have this in their top 3, however, I don't feel as connected to it as many others do. It's certainly one of the better movies on this list, but not much happens, which is too different from what we've seen. It does introduce this new idea of having a family next door when there are teens at Camp Crystal Lake, and it especially introduces fan favourite Tommy Jarvis, who is this little boy amongst that family. All the kills here are all different and very graphic and gory, so I can see why people like it on that front. I wasn't a huge fan of how this movie was edited. Sometimes it would stay on a character for way too long, the camera. Like, especially there's this girl eating a banana and it just sticks to her, just still eating it until Jason inevitably comes up behind her and crushes her head or whatever. The characters are all likable here, not amazing, but then when have you ever had amazing characters in these movies? So some of the best you're ever going to get out of this series. This is where many thought the series was done for good, because Jason gets killed, but oh, you were wrong. You still had quite a few movies left to produce after this one. Coming in at 4th place, we have Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. This is one of the more well-structured movies on this list, and it has a new tone. It was one of the more engaging stories in the whole franchise. The characters were genuinely people you would care about and were interested in what they do throughout this story. It was consistent with the story and the characters throughout the whole movie, and it was the perfect bounce back from a new beginning. It really does stand out with some of its fresh ideas, how it's unique in this franchise. The same goes for the kills it had. They were some of the fan favourites from the whole series. So just overall, a very solid movie on this list, especially for one which looked like it was going to go down a bad path once again, as it came after a new beginning. But I think making Jason supernatural from this movie onwards really helped the franchise, and if you ask people about Jason now, they'll all be convinced that he's always been supernatural. So it just shows the impact this movie had on the whole franchise overall. Coming in at 3rd place, we have Friday the 13th, 2009 reboot. This was a remake just like the Nightmare on Elm Street had a reboot a year after this one, and for me, this is the scariest that I've seen Jason throughout this whole franchise. I said the same for Freddy from the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, but they try and make these reboots as realistic as they can, and it genuinely kind of gets under your skin. Freddy from that remake was a lot darker, a lot creepier, and this one, Jason looked like more of a threat as he ran aggressively at people instead of just slowly walking like Mike Myers had. Or if he wasn't fully sprinting, he was being clever and setting traps like someone would do. So I just was a huge fan of Jason in this movie, and it really helped it be one of the creepier ones in this franchise. However, some of the characters really do let this movie down. We do have some good characters in here. We have a nice brother-sister relationship we have two funny characters, and then we have this couple who just want to get naked literally every 5 seconds, so it's really distracting from what could have been maybe a #1 contender if they didn't have that element in this movie. Coming in at second place, we have Friday the 13th Part 2. This is the entry where we're actually introduced to Jason for the first time. Whereas Part 3 had him with his hockey mask, this one had like a sack over his head. It's actually quite hard to talk about this one as it's played it safe and doesn't do much different to what the first one had done. The only difference really is that instead of the POV kills we had from what we found out was Pamela Voorhees, this one we have Jason in all his glory taking out people at Camp Crystal Lake. Like, there can't be much said, it was just a solid slasher movie. Had some nice callbacks to the first one even though they were small. Had some interesting kills and it was fun to see them in all their glory this time. And as it's our first movie with Jason in the spotlight, it's a contender for top spot. However, not as easily as you'd think. In first place, we do have the original Friday the 13th. An introduction to this popular franchise. This film only had a budget of about $500,000. I don't think it ever was dreaming of having a franchise as big as it is now, but it's just a really cool slasher movie with a great twist at the end. The kills aren't amazing, and all this movie they're all talking about this guy who drowned in the lake called Jason, and we're all really convinced the killer is Jason. They have all these kills from the killer's point of view, from their eyes, but it actually turns out to be Jason's mum, which is funny because I ask people about Friday the 13th who aren't like huge fans, who don't remember each film or haven't seen every movie, they would actually be convinced that Jason was the killer from the first one, which 2 years before I started watching them I didn't realise that Pamela was killer in the first one. So such a well kept secret for such a popular franchise as well. Although it is in first place, many originals are normally in first place, this one isn't as cemented in that spot. It really took some thinking, and if you look at other people's rankings, they don't have this one in first place, so it was a really tough decision, but I'm going to stick with this. It doesn't have all the kills, it doesn't have, a huge budget, it doesn't have money splashed into these over the top kills, but it's just a really cool movie with a nice twist at the end, and that's why it comes in at #1. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments what your ranking would be. And if you're interested, I've just chucked up my ranking once again on screen, but with the scores I've given for each movie. As you can see, the original really didn't win by much. It was very close. And with horror movies or comedies, and especially so many of them, rankings are really hard because they're pretty much around the same stuff. There's quite a few movies in this franchise which do repeat the same stuff, so it was quite a hard list to make and it required a lot of thinking. But yeah, let me know what your ranking would be in the comments. Please like and subscribe, that would mean a lot. But anyways, I hope you enjoy your Friday the 13th, and I hope to see you in my next video.